So today we're talking about portrait photography. Let's go. Let's take a walk. Now I know it looks like I have a small rodent on my head, but just try and ignore that. Wow, that is really bad. What the? Yeah, I really should have probably put hairspray in it this morning because it looks very interesting. But anyways, today I'm going to be showing you 10 really awesome portrait photography tricks that you guys can use to instantly improve your portrait game. And you'll just end up having better portraits by the end of it if you just try and apply these throughout your shoot. So now the first thing I want you to do is avoid flat backgrounds. Just like this one. You can see how much more boring the video has become because there's just a yellow wall here and it's not interesting at all. What you want to do instead of this is look for backgrounds that have a little more depth to them. Like you can already see this video has become a little more interesting because, you know, we've got a door there, we've got some garages. I know the lighting isn't the best, but you get the point. If you add depth to your background and different distanced elements, it'll make it just look more interesting for the viewer. And this goes for any photography or video work that you do. If you just add a bit of depth and distance to your background, you'll have a better result at the end of it. All right, on to number 2, which is lighting. Very important. What you want to avoid is exactly this, direct, harsh sunlight. You won't end up with an exceptional photo at the end of it if you shoot in direct sunlight. You can fix some of it in editing, but you can only fix so much. Whereas if you were shooting in the shade, you'll end up with a much nicer and more balanced image. Shooting in the shade or by a window is a must because this can honestly be the difference between a professional looking portrait and an amateur one. Keep that in mind. Number 3, and that is f-stop. Now, this is another very important one which can either make or ruin your portrait. If you have your f-stop too high, all of this, all the background is going to be in focus and it's going to be really distracting for whoever's looking at your photo because they won't know which part. Am I supposed to be looking at the person or am I supposed to be looking at the background? But on the other hand, if you have your f-stop too low, parts of your subject might not be in focus, like the distance between your nose and your ear, like that much distance, that can be the difference between being in focus and not being in focus. Like you could have their nose in focus, but their ear might be just completely blurry. So that's where you need to be careful. So now let's talk about number 4, which is focal length. Now this is something that doesn't really cross a lot of people's minds when they're shooting portraits. You can see my face looks all right. It's not oblong or doesn't look weird or anything. But if I went down to 10 millimeters, if I zoomed out, you can see now my face looks really freaking weird. It looks long and oblong. You can barely see my ears. This is what you got to be careful of when you're shooting portraits, because if they have their hand out, their hand's going to look twice as big as their head, and it's even worse if you have it lower down, because then you'll make their hips look massive or you'll make them look like a pear. So just be careful. So now on to number 5, which is your eyes. Well, not your eyes, the person you're taking a photo of, their eyes. In my opinion, if you want to make a portrait pop or stand out, you need to include their eyes and you need to make it very obvious, and you need to make their eyes kind of like somewhat the center of the portrait. Because most of the iconic portraits that you see, you can see their eyes. They've got some like glint in their eyes, or it just looks so good because you can see their eye clearly and the emotion that they're portraying using their eyes. All right, so this is number 6, and this is about highlights. Now, this kind of contradicts what I said before about lighting, but if you have a light source like the sun, you can get some really awesome lighting effects on your subject, usually around sunrise or sunset. This is where it works the best because the sun's low, so it won't be going straight down on their head. It'll be either behind, which is the best way to do it. If you get the sun so it's shining behind someone's hair, it'll go through the hair and you'll get this really cool like rimming effect of light around your subject, and it works really well. It's one of the more difficult tips, but I guarantee if you keep taking portraits, you'll end up doing it by accident and you'll be very happy that you did. Now for number 7, which is time of day. Now, the best time to go shooting for portraits is an hour after sunrise and an hour before sunset. Let me just stay back here in the good light. So if you want to get the nice highlights and the nice light rims around your subject, try going sunrise or sunset. You can get good portraits during noon if you're in the shade or if you have a decent light setup, but for natural light, that is what you want to do. And I mean, that's not just for portraits either. I think any type of photography you do will look better at sunrise or sunset, so just keep that in mind. looks better. Now it just looks like a mushroom. So now on to number 9, which is shutter speed. Pretty easy. I usually have mine between 200 to 400 shutter speed. I know that's kinda overkill, but better safe than to be sorry. I usually have my shutter speed that high because I want it to be crisp and sharp, and if the wind blows and you get some motion blur on some jacket or their hair, it can ruin the portrait. So higher shutter speed, the better. I think that goes for most photography anyway. So we're back to where we started for number 10, and this is foreground. You want to put stuff in your foreground when you're shooting a portrait. Now this is probably the thing that will take your portraits to the next level. Having something in your foreground, framing your subject. It just adds another layer of depth. So now you have 3. You have 1 layer, 2 layer, and then a 3rd layer, which is the background. Is what you see the majority of professional portraits have. They have those 3 layers. And this really helps, especially if your background or your subject isn't very fancy, like right now. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you gained some value out of this. I hope you learned something. And I'll see you in the next video. Peace.